The Canon Rebel T4i, or 650D if you're outside the US, is a cropped sensor DSLR marketed to the entry-level-ish photographer. It is the latest in a long line of Canon Rebel DSLRs, but this one has some extra special features that make it stand out from its predecessors. One of those special features is a touchscreen, which is groundbreaking for the DSLR market. I'll talk more about the touchscreen later. Throughout this video, I'll be focusing on the still photography features of the T4i, because that's what I use my DSLRs for. Don't worry though, I'll mention the video capabilities. I'll just mostly be talking about still photography. Size small. The T4i has a light, compact body. It's perfect for everyday use or for taking, just out and about. I've taken it all over the place, including hiking. The T4i has an 18 megapixel APS-C sensor, which is a cropped sensor. That means that your crop factor is 1.6x. This guy is fast. It can shoot at 5 frames per second. I found that it does shoot super fast for a few seconds, but the buffer will fill up and slow it down. That being said, you'll rarely find this lacking. You have plenty of time to shoot that breakaway at the big game before it starts to slow down. Frames per second is great, but is it responsive? Does the camera focus quickly enough? Definitely. The T4i snaps into focus quickly, so you can actually utilize those 5 frames per second. You have several ways to autofocus. You can choose how the camera focuses by choosing one-shot autofocus or predictive AI servo autofocus. You also have AI focus autofocus, where it will decide which one you need. Or, of course, you could use manual focus. The T4i has 9 autofocus points, and they're all cross-type points at f5.6. There's also a diagonal cross-type center point at f2.8. There is one SD card slot on the T4i. There is a pop-up flash. Like many DSLRs, you have the option to switch it over to manual output and decide how much light you actually want. The pop-up flash is also the modeling light to help you autofocus in low light conditions. The T4i has the now standard HD video capabilities. You can shoot 1080p at 30 frames per second for about 22 minutes. Plus, you have all of these other movie options. You have many exposure modes to use. They're all on the dial on the top of the camera. Canon breaks them down into 2 sections, the basic zone and the creative zone. The basic zone will be modes that the new user will set up shop in. It's a great starting place to see what kinds of decisions the camera makes in different situations. On the flip side, the creative zone is where more experienced users will set up shop. Let's talk about basic first. There are a lot of modes here. In all of them, the camera will set everything automatically. You, of course, have auto and auto flash off, plus a bunch of scene modes like portrait and sports. But there's also creative auto, where the T4i basically asks you questions on screen about what your goal is. It asks you what ambiance you want, how blurry or sharp you want the background, what drive mode you want, like do you want to take one shot or have a burst of shots, and how you want the flash to behave. This allows you to customize how your end result looks without really knowing how the camera is making the adjustments. Then there's the creative zone, for when you know how to make those adjustments, to at least some of the settings anyway. There are the standard DSLR exposure modes: program, aperture priority, shutter priority, and manual. You have all the white balance and picture style settings that you would expect, including customizable settings for each. You also have the expected metering modes: evaluative, partial, spot, and center weighted average. You can change them all on the touchscreen. When it comes to drive modes, the T4i has several, which can be changed on the touchscreen: single shooting, continuous shooting, and a few self-timer options. You can choose the delay time and even use an optional remote. The T4i has several features, which makes it easy and enjoyable to use. Some of them are fairly standard in today's DSLRs, like Live View and the Feature Guide, which shows you a description of the settings that you're adjusting on the LCD screen. However, there are a couple features that are pretty special. The flip-out LCD screen is one of them. There are other DSLRs today that have a flip-out screen, but not too many. I particularly like that I can close the screen to protect it against scratches. The touch screen is the big deal on the T4i. You can change a whole slew of settings on the quick control screen simply by touching the screen. You can also navigate the menus by touch. There aren't a whole lot of buttons and dials on the body, so the touchable quick control screen makes all the difference for ease of use. You can do some post-processing of your images right in the camera, even your raw images. You can resize the image, and you can also apply creative filters, like grainy black and white, fisheye effect, and soft focus. You can even adjust how the effect is applied. Since this camera is marketed to the entry-level set, this feature could be really useful for a user who doesn't have photo editing software yet. You can use the T4i with Canon EF and EFS lenses, plus the Canon EX speedlights, and several of their non-EX speedlights as well. There is a wireless remote available too, which you can use in conjunction with the self-timer. There is an optional battery grip too. The battery grip takes an additional T4i battery or AA batteries. It allows you to shoot vertical and also balances the small body when using larger lenses. With some battery grips, the frame speed is boosted, but not so with this grip. You can't go any faster than 5 frames per second. This camera does really well in low light situations. The ISO range is 100 to 12,800, but expands to 25,600. Yes, there will be grain in your images when you utilize the higher ISO numbers. There is with any camera, but I've been impressed with its high ISO performance. In the studio, the T4i works like a champ. I've got clear, crisp images out of the studio. I also like the T4i for walking around at family gatherings and such. It's small and light, so it isn't cumbersome when I'm chatting up my aunts and uncles or getting snacks, so I can carry it around and be ready for photo opportunities. I mentioned hiking at the beginning of this video. I've taken the T4i hiking several times, and I've been pleased with the results. You can't beat a small and lightweight camera when you're being active, especially when it takes great photos. It also comes in handy when you're at a sporting event, like maybe a soccer game. Again, it's compact but super quick, so you'll be able to carry it around and be ready to take photos when the action happens. In the US, you can get the T4i body for around $800 just for the body, but there are a couple different kits as well. One includes the 18 to 55 millimeter lens, and that will run you about $900. The other kit includes an 18 to 135 lens, and that runs you about $1,100. There are a few drawbacks to the Canon Rebel T4i. I can really think of only two. First, the T4i's buttons are a little too easy to press. When I'm out hiking, I wear the camera cross-body. I often look down and I find that I'm in the process of inadvertently changing settings or even deleting photos because the camera has bumped up against my stomach or, hit the camelback or something. Fortunately, I can flip the LCD screen closed, which solves the problem. Unfortunately, I find it inconvenient to open and close the thing every time I want to check or change my settings. Now, I really haven't had this problem with other cameras. I think it's just something that I'm going to have to keep in mind when I'm using this one. Second, you have to press a button to change the autofocus point, which just seems unnecessary. These two drawbacks aren't deal breakers by any means. They are really just more annoyances that I will probably get used to. The Canon Rebel T4i is lightweight and quick and easy to use. To make it even better, the image quality is great, and you've got lots of flexibility when you want it. Though it could definitely be used in a professional setting, it does lack the buttons and dials on the body for blind, super quick access to adjustments. But for the entry-level-ish market, the average user, the parents, the occasional professional, the T4i is a winner.